Support the troops who oppose the war, by the Southern Avenger. Over the Veterans Day weekend, a good friend and 5-year Army veteran reminded me of the political and moral schizophrenia that continues to cloud our judgment when it comes to American foreign policy. Prominent politicians, talk radio hosts, and others insist that in order to support the troops, one has to support the mission in Iraq, despite the fact that so many soldiers, including my Army veteran friend, completely disagree. According to most polls, public sentiment has drastically turned against the war, with upwards of 70% of Americans believing not only that Iraq was a mistake, but that prolonging the war is a mistake. Or as Vietnam combat veteran, Deputy Administrator of Veteran Affairs under Ronald Reagan, and Republican Senator Chuck Hagel describes the continuation of this war for seemingly political reasons, quote, "That's a lesson we did not learn from Vietnam. We've got a similar situation in Iraq today." And Hagel isn't the only veteran speaking out against the war. Just last month, former commander of the coalition forces in Iraq, Army General Ricardo Sanchez, said bluntly that, quote, "There is no question that America is living a nightmare with no end in sight." When asked about the success of Bush's surge, Sanchez replied, quote, "The best we can do with this flawed approach is to stave off defeat." Or how about Army veteran, National Security Advisor under Ronald Reagan, and assistant to Colin Powell, Lawrence Wilkerson, who has called the Iraq war intelligence a complete hoax. When Powell was urged by the Bush administration to make the case for war with Iraq before the United Nations in 2003, Wilkerson laments, quote, "My participation in that presentation at the UN constitutes the lowest point in my professional life. I participated in a hoax on the American people, the international community, and the United Nations Security Council." Even Army General David Petraeus, who some have accused of being a political general and for covering for President Bush, has stated forthrightly that, quote, "There is no military solution in Iraq." So what are we still doing over there? That's the question Marine Lance Corporal James Miller is asking. Miller became a national symbol of the Iraq war in the days after the Battle of Fallujah, when a photographer captured his fatigued, war-weary face with blood trickling from his ear and a cigarette dangling from his mouth. Many Americans, both home and abroad, have even called Miller the Marlboro Marine. But now that this 21-year-old Kentucky boy has returned home, he is not only fighting for soldiers suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome, but as the Los Angeles Times reported on Veterans Day, Miller, quote, "has slowly turned against the war. We've done some humanitarian aid," Miller said, "but what good have we actually done, and what has America gained except a lot of deaths? It burns me up." His wife Jessica, who sports an "I love my Marine" sticker on her car, says she and Miller are behind the troops, though they no longer support the war. According to some people in this country, the brave Marine Miller and his dutiful wife are not patriotic, simply because they don't support the war. Quite frankly, I'm tired of listening to such nonsense. I'm tired of hearing the toughest talk from men who have never served in uniform, chicken hawks on the radio like Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, those running for office like Rudy Giuliani and Mitt Romney, or even those running our government like Dick Cheney and George W. Bush, who have managed to fool enough Americans into believing that abusing our military for dubious reasons is somehow patriotic, despite the fact that none of these men has the slightest idea of what war is really like. And I include myself in this mix. I have no idea what the horror of war must be like. But I'm not afraid to listen to men who do know, as they are the true experts with unmatched experience and unquestionable credentials. This is not to say there aren't plenty of veterans with a differing opinion, but you would never know it from listening to this president or his cronies in the media and his own party. Supporting the troops does not mean supporting the war, as many a soldier will gladly tell you. And on Veterans Day and every day, we should remember there's nothing patriotic about reducing a soldier's sacrifice to a political position or a campaign slogan. And shame on those who do. For more commentaries, log into SouthernAvenger.com, read my weekly column in the Charleston City paper, or listen here each Tuesday and Friday to the Southern Avenger, only on 1250 WTMA.